The first time my parents discovered what I actually did for a living, I wasn't standing alone. I was standing between two police officers exactly 45 minutes after my grandfather's coded message reached my phone. The look on their faces wasn't relief. It was disbelief. For 17 years, they had told relatives, neighbors, and even strangers that I was the family disappointment, the son who never found a real career, who drifted from one temporary job to another, barely surviving in a tiny apartment. They laughed whenever my name came up at family gatherings. They pitied me in public and criticized me in private. I let them. As I stepped onto their porch that rainy evening, I could hear my mother's nervous breathing through the half-open door. My father froze, his coffee mug slipping from his fingers and shattering across the tile floor. Behind them stood my grandfather, pale but calm, clutching the old pocket watch that carried the hidden message only I would recognize. His eyes met mine for just a second. That was enough. Someone inside this house had crossed a line they believed no one would ever uncover. They expected silence. They expected fear. Most of all, they expected me, the unemployed failure, to be powerless. Instead, I had arrived with the authority they never imagined I possessed. And before the night was over, every lie they had built over 17 years was about to collapse in front of them. The revenge had not begun that evening. It had been patiently waiting for this exact knock on their door. My name is Daniel, and for most of my life, my parents measured success by what other people could see. Expensive cars, impressive job titles, oversized houses. Those were the things they respected. Quiet people were invisible to them, and I learned early that I fit into that category. When I left home at 22, I stopped trying to prove anything. Every phone call became an interrogation about my career, and every family dinner ended with my father reminding everyone that my younger brother had become the successful one. I never argued. Correcting people only feeds those who enjoy looking down on you. The truth was simple. My work required complete discretion. The fewer people who knew about it, the safer everyone remained, including my family. So when relatives asked what I did, I smiled and gave vague answers. My parents turned those answers into stories about unemployment, failure, and wasted potential. Before long, the rumors became accepted as fact. Only one person never believed them. My grandfather watched instead of judged. He noticed that I never borrowed money, never asked for favors, and always appeared exactly where I was needed. He once told me that silence reveals more character than speeches ever could. That was why, when something went terribly wrong inside my parents' home, he didn't call my father, my brother, or any neighbor. He sent one coded message to me. The insults were never dramatic enough for anyone else to notice. That was what made them so effective. Whenever I visited for birthdays or holidays, my father would greet my brother with a firm handshake and a proud smile before, turning to me with a distracted nod, as though I had arrived by accident. My mother always asked whether I had finally found steady work, even though she never waited long enough to hear the answer. She would sigh softly, pat my shoulder, and change the subject before anyone else could. The room always seemed to follow her lead. Relatives exchanged sympathetic glances across the dinner table. An uncle once quietly slipped a $20 bill into my jacket pocket, convinced I couldn't afford the drive home. I found it hours later and mailed it back without a note. The worst moments belonged to my younger brother. He never mocked me directly. Instead, he smiled with effortless confidence whenever our parents praised his promotions, his new investments, or another expensive purchase. Between those conversations, he would glance at me for only a second, a look that carried equal parts pity and quiet satisfaction. Grandpa noticed every one of those moments. He rarely defended me out loud. Instead, he watched in silence, his eyes lingering on faces instead of words, as if he were patiently waiting for everyone to reveal exactly who they were. Everything changed on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was leaving a meeting when my phone vibrated with a message from Grandpa. It contained only a string of numbers and one sentence that would have looked meaningless to anyone else. The watch had stopped at 4:15. Years earlier, after helping him through a difficult legal dispute, we had agreed on a simple code. He would never use it unless he was in immediate danger and couldn't speak freely. I checked the time. 45 minutes. That was all I would need to reach my parents' house. As I drove, I contacted 2 officers I had worked with before and shared exactly what Grandpa's message meant. There was no panic in my voice, only certainty. If he had activated the code, something serious had happened. For years, I had accepted my parents' assumptions because correcting them served no purpose. Their opinion had never threatened my life or my career. This was different. Someone had frightened the only person who had always believed in me. When my car turned onto their street, I saw Grandpa standing through the front window, his shoulders tense, still holding the pocket watch in his hand. He spotted my vehicle, and for the first time in years, I saw relief replace the quiet patience in his eyes. In that moment, I understood something with complete clarity. I wasn't there to defend my reputation. I was there to protect the one person who had never questioned my worth. I didn't rush through the front door or make dramatic accusations. Panic creates noise, and noise gives dishonest people time to rewrite the truth. Before stepping out of the car, I reviewed everything I already knew. My work had taught me that facts matter more than emotions. For nearly 2 decades, I had built a career conducting financial investigations for government agencies, tracing hidden transactions, verifying records, and documenting evidence that could withstand scrutiny in court. Confidentiality wasn't just part of my job. It was the reason my parents had never known what I actually did. The 2 officers who arrived with me weren't there because I had called in a favor. They responded because Grandpa's message, combined with the information I provided, established reasonable grounds for a welfare check and possible financial exploitation. As they approached the house, I quietly handed over copies of property, records, and recent banking activity that I had legally obtained after. Grandpa granted me limited authority to monitor unusual transactions months earlier. Several signatures didn't match his normal writing. Large withdrawals had appeared without explanation. I said very little. The evidence spoke for itself. If my parents had done nothing wrong, the records would clear them. If they had crossed the line Grandpa feared they had, then the same silence they had, mistaken for weakness over the last 17 years, would become the strongest witness against them. The officers entered first, speaking in calm, measured voices. No one was handcuffed. No one raised their voice. The silence inside the house was far more unsettling than an argument could have been. My grandfather invited them into the study. I remained in the hallway, watching my parents exchange uncertain glances for the first time in years. My father looked at me as if he were trying to recognize a stranger. My mother kept searching my face for an explanation that wasn't coming. One document after another was placed on the desk. Bank statements, property records, authorization forms. Then came the signature comparison. The room seemed to shrink as the officers quietly pointed out the inconsistencies. Grandpa confirmed he had never approved the transfers or agreed to mortgage part of his property. My brother's confidence disappeared the moment he realized the records could not be explained away. No one looked at me anymore. They were too busy confronting the evidence. When an officer finally asked who had uncovered the irregularities, Grandpa answered before I could. My grandson. The same grandson they had spent 17 years calling a failure. My father lowered his eyes. My mother gripped the edge of a chair, unable to speak. Their carefully protected image dissolved without a single accusation from me. I had waited years to be understood. In the end, I never needed to defend myself. The truth had arrived carrying its own authority, and it left no room for anyone else's version of the story. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. The investigation continued through the proper legal channels, and the facts unfolded one document at a time. My brother was required to answer difficult questions about the transactions, while my parents faced the painful realization that trusting appearances had nearly cost my grandfather everything. There were no dramatic confrontations, only long conversations interrupted by uncomfortable silences. News traveled through the family faster than I ever could have imagined. The same relatives, who had once whispered that I couldn't keep a job now, learned that I had been the one who uncovered the fraud and protected Grandpa's home. A few called to apologize. Others avoided me altogether, embarrassed by how easily they had believed the story my parents had repeated for years. I accepted neither revenge nor praise as a victory. The greatest change happened inside me. I no longer felt the need to explain my choices or earn approval from people who had never taken the time to understand them. Their opinion had shaped my childhood, but it no longer defined my future. If there's one reason this story matters, it's because many people know what it's like to be underestimated. Sometimes the loudest judgment comes from those closest to us, but reputations built on assumptions eventually collapse when they meet undeniable truth. Respect gained through appearances is temporary. Respect earned through quiet integrity lasts far longer. A few months later, life settled into a rhythm that felt unfamiliar but honest. My grandfather remained in his home, surrounded by the memories he had spent a lifetime building. We shared coffee every Sunday, rarely talking about the investigation. We didn't need to. The quiet between us carried more trust than words ever could. My parents reached out more than once. Their messages were careful, almost hesitant, as though they were speaking to someone they had never really known. I answered when I was ready, not out of obligation, but because forgiveness is strongest when it comes without surrendering your self-respect. Some relationships can be repaired. Others can only become respectful from a distance. I no longer felt responsible for deciding which outcome made other people comfortable. As for my work, nothing changed. I returned to the same quiet profession that had protected countless strangers while remaining invisible to most of the world. Recognition had never been the goal. Doing the right thing had. Looking back, I realized my greatest revenge was never exposing anyone or proving them wrong. It was refusing to let their opinion decide who I became. While they spent 17 years believing I had failed, I was quietly building a life defined by discipline, purpose, and integrity. People will always judge what they can see, but character is revealed by what you choose to do when no one is watching. And, in the end, that is the only success that truly endures.